Okay, why do you keep failing at the marathon? You probably think the answer is simple. You went out too hard, you needed more fitness, or you just got the pacing wrong. But that's not the real reason. The real reason most runners fail at the marathon is that they have never properly learned marathon effort. If you've ran 1, 2, 3 marathons, or you've been around marathon running circles, you will know the advice for a marathon. You gotta feel for the first half like the handbrake's on. You gotta feel in control, you gotta start easy. Every marathon runner knows that advice. And because the marathon distance is so daunting, a lot stick to it. The advice is not the problem. And the reason you're failing in the final third or the final quarter of the marathon is in most cases not because you went out too hard or you didn't start easy enough and you didn't take that advice. And you're not failing, you've put in all this work, you're not failing because you're not fit enough. It's because we haven't worked specifically at exactly those work rates that we're going to demonstrate at each stage in the marathon. And because we've not practiced those different effort rates within the race, especially the beginning and middle of the race, when we have then not got the legs to execute and either hold pace or accelerate in the final 10K or 6 miles, we then chalk it up to, well, I started too quick, or I didn't have the legs, I didn't have the endurance, I didn't have the fitness when it counted. Here's a small change you can make so that you can rectify that problem. Most of us know what it's like to run at a 10 out of 10. After 80 to 100 meters, we'll be wiped out and we won't be able to do anything for the next 10 minutes. If I ask you to run at a 1 out of 10, you probably run too quick in the beginning, and then you'll realize that actually it looks like running, but it's not that much quicker than walking initially, and then you become more efficient, and that 1 out of 10 actually starts to feel like running. The problem is that not only is the marathon not run at a 1 out of 10, or a 10 out of 10 until the final meters. It's run in a range between 5, 6, and 7, mostly out of 10, if your finish time is anywhere between 2 and 3 hours 45. So what happens if you ask somebody to run at a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10? I've tried to do it many times on YouTube, and you can see the comments. It's almost impossible for people. And the reason it's impossible for people is, number one, it's subjective. If someone's doing a fitness test and they're pointing at the 1 out of 10 perceived effort or the Borg scale, two different runners are going to be having two different experiences, even if internally we can see from their physiology that they're very much having a similar experience, but it's perceived differently. But more important than that, it's because we do not practice at those effort levels. And so if we don't practice at the 5 and 6 out of 10, how are we going to do at those important stages in the marathon, first half to 10K to go, approximately, to give you simple round numbers? How are we ever going to get efficient at those levels? So naturally what happens when we start a marathon with that good advice that this should feel like we've got the handbrake on, we should start easy, it should feel controlled. What actually happens when a runner moves into that feeling because they're forced to, because of the task of running 26 miles, 42K, they're actually incredibly inefficient at that 5 out of 10 and 6 out of 10. And the wonderful thing about the marathon is it's not going to tell you in the first half, it's not going to tell you for that next part, it's going to politely let you know with around about 10K to go, usually very politely around the 20-mile mark or the 30K mark, that you now do not have the energy to complete the task. And so of course we chalk it up to, at that point, the 20-mile mark or the 30K mark, I didn't have the legs, I didn't have the energy, and therefore we jump to the conclusion that, okay, I didn't have the legs because I didn't have the endurance. I've not done enough long runs. I've not spent enough time on my feet. When the real problem is that the metabolic costs of running that first half and that next segment was so high because you're inefficient at that 5 and 6 out of 10, that when it came to the point for you to dig in, put in the hard work, finish fast, you didn't have the energy left. And so the funny thing is the solution that we have is to a wrongly diagnosed problem. And our solution is to do more of what didn't work. Let's just go back to the extremes. 1 out of 10, you could teach a runner to do that pretty quickly within a couple of runs. 10 out of 10, we've already got that and we already know exactly how to go all out. For a lot of runners, either they've learned or they've learned the hard way what it feels like to do easy runs, for it to be conversational, to let the body recover whilst building that aerobic base, but let the body recover so that we're ready to put it into faster sessions in the typical schedule of a marathon runner. And again, going back to the UK club system, and this is echoed around the world, Tuesday night as fast as you can possibly go, Thursday night as fast as you can possibly go, Sunday or Saturday, long, slow distance for the long run, because that's how we've always done it, and we're pretty beat up still from those two almost back-to-back faster sessions that also weren't feeding in to what we're trying to do, which is trying to run as fast as we possibly can over 26 miles on one morning on one day. A pace can feel controlled, but it's actually costing us too much. And that is most of the time what happens in a marathon, and it's why people slow in that final quarter. It's why a negative split is so rare, depending on the conditions, between 1% in a race and 15%. And the reason that is, and if you think, okay, the perfect way to pace a marathon would be exactly even splits or a slight negative split, the fact that that percentage is so low of negative splits shows how few people learn to pace a marathon. So this problem that we're trying to fix, as simple as it sounds to fix, it's actually the biggest problem that marathon runners have. And the wild thing is that we've kind of accepted it. That advice of first half with the handbrake on, controlled, start easy, it's good advice and we all know it. We also know that the final 6 miles or 10K is an all-out war. You run as fast as you can to the finish and you try and hold on for dear life. We know those advices. From anybody who's run a marathon, and from marathon circles, you'll hear that advice. We don't often hear about that middle section, which is interesting, between 30 miles and 20 miles. And that's a really important point in the race, because as fatigue is going up, as we're getting more and more tired, often pace is drifting. Often we make mistakes, we make bad decisions, we forget about taking a gel, or we forget a drink station. If you look at people on a course, they're not taking the race line. But that section is incredibly important, because if we can get that right, and again, going back to perceived efforts, that's 6 or 7 out of 10, if we can get that right and deliver ourselves to that key point in the marathon to put the energy that we then have, because everything has been controlled and practiced, into play and run as hard as we can to the finish, we're going to be passing people because of that 1 to 15% minority that are running a negative split. If we can run that negative split and get used to pacing a marathon correctly, running that negative split, we're going to be passing people in the second half and all the way through the marathon. And that is incredibly motivating, very good skill to have, and a great game to play, having targets on the backs of people that you're chasing down. Brilliant distraction to have at that point in the marathon when you're feeling that fatigue. So what is the problem condensed into a sentence? Most runners do not fail at the marathon because they lack fitness, but because they never learn how the right marathon effort is supposed to feel. If that's the problem, then our job as marathon runners in marathon training is to prepare for that marathon race. And the way that we prepare for each section of that marathon is to become incredibly comfortable and incredibly familiar, most importantly, incredibly efficient at that 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, and 7 out of 10. And if you're already screaming at the screen, it is impossible to judge that 5 and 6 out of 10. Then great. Continue to fail at the marathon, continue to fly around the world to different marathons and not hitting the goal that you would really love to hit, your dream time. The marathon is just an event. What matters is how we prepare our body to react in the best way to that event. How we prepare our body in the best possible way to get ready to run 26 miles as fast as we possibly can. And to do that, one of the jobs is to become as efficient as possible at that 5 and 6 out of 10. So that is a task within this project. If we don't do it, we will fail. And so the real job is, when we're in this mindset of I want to run sub 3, or I want to run sub 3:30, 2:40, whatever that round number is that you're chasing, the body does not care. The body doesn't know about distance, it doesn't know about pace. What it knows and what it reacts deeply to is fatigue, stress, and time. It doesn't care what you want to run in the future, what you want to run 12 months from now or 3 months from now. You're preparing your body to run as fast as you possibly can for those 26 miles or 42K. Whether you like it or not, that 5 out of 10 and 6 out of 10, we've got to practice that level. So first of all, we've got to define Where is that level? And a simple definition: controlled, sustainable, restrained, relaxed, comfortable, stable breathing. You're running within yourself. You can talk but not sing. And a bunch of other words and phrases that basically mean it's easier than you think. And remember, this is your early marathon effort. If you've got good at, okay, being in zone 2, can I talk? Can I get out full sentences? Can I have a full conversation? If you've become good at that, then it's a very easy step to get to 5 out of 10. All of a sudden, you can talk, but it's more like sentences instead of full paragraphs. Getting used to that 5 out of 10, that first threshold, that LT1, it's actually very simple for most runners. If you're going off what the zones and thresholds are on your watch, it's most likely, in my experience, to be out. What we're looking to do is for 5 out of 10, that feeling of 5 out of 10, locking it in, and then, as I always say, let the pace come to you. Meaning that if you are going for that sub 3 hour marathon, however reasonable or unreasonable that number may be to your current fitness and how long you've got to prepare for the marathon, we need that 4:15 a kilometer or 6:50 per mile to come for the first half of the marathon to your 5 to 6 out of 10 perceived effort. The marathon, because of the duration, will always be, and because of how close to our limit we're going to be at the end, it will always be a progression in terms of effort. What usually happens when you've got precisely the right training and precisely the right training method is, in actual fact, in order to stack the volume of work that you specifically need to do and the consistency over the weeks and months, in actual fact, that training, that marathon training, is a lot easier than what you thought. And that catches a lot of runners out. But if you think about it and you were to go as hard as you possibly can, Tuesday and Thursday, every week, eventually being at that 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 perceived effort by the end of the session, usually on a track, of course it's going to wipe you out eventually. And if you're training to run 26 miles as fast as you possibly can from start to finish on one morning on one day, and you're doing Tuesday night 8 times 800 meters as fast as you possibly can, and then a long, slow distance, 24 miles, as slow as you can possibly go because of the fatigue and because of the distance, then you're training for something different than running as fast as you possibly can for the marathon distance on one morning on one day. And I'll show you a perfect example. And the reason it's a perfect example is we can compare the same race 2025 to the same race 2026. Same runner, same heart rate, completely different result, and completely different feeling. So this is the same race 12 months apart. And in those 12 months, he's improved by 47 minutes. That's 1 minute and 5 seconds per kilometer faster. And as you can see, for the same average heart rate. And because the training load is less by 12%, that's allowed him to run a 5-minute negative split. Can you imagine how that feels in that final third? So same runner, same marathon, same heart rate, less effort, so more controlled, 47 minutes faster. Now, I've talked about pacing a marathon to effort, pacing a marathon specifically to you as an individual athlete, and becoming in tune with those different efficiencies within a marathon, those different effort levels. We also, of course, for the marathon, we need to consider fueling, we need to consider your durability, we need to consider stacking the work, but then freshening up just in time to peak for the race, and then understanding our ability, understanding our fitness level specific to the task. There's a lot that goes into the marathon, and that's what makes it such a big accomplishment to get right. And once you can pace a marathon right, you'll never ever forget how to do it properly in the future. It'll be with you forever. And if we go back to the stat before, that between 1% run a negative split and 15%, depending on how bad or good the conditions are, then you're gonna have a great time in the second part of the marathon if you learn to pace the distance right. Pacing a marathon isn't just restraint. It isn't just run the first half like you've got the handbrake on, in control, the last 6 miles, all out war. Pacing a marathon is about understanding the effort levels, your efficiencies, and then working to those in training.